What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of The Vidja Store. And today we get to talk about something that is really near and dear to my heart. If you grew up in the late 80s or the early 90s, you know what I'm about to talk about. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was huge, it was everywhere, pizza, parties, everything. I mean, it was just ridiculous how incredibly popular this series was and still is nowadays. It spawned several video games on the NES, the Game Boy, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis. The key thing that everybody remembers was going to the arcade. You could pal up with 3 friends and take on the Foot Clan and Shredder together at the same time, all of you working together in the same arcade game. It was so freaking cool, man. Konami was the definitive ruler of arcades back then. I mean, once the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game came out, they just hit a gold mine of success, spawning a sequel. They even used the same engine for The Simpsons. They had other 4-player games like Sunset Riders, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is always the go-to game. So let's take a look and see what was different between the arcade edition and the console edition that I rented as a kid from Blockbuster Video. The first time I saw this game running on a Super Nintendo demo station at Toys R Us, my parents knew that they were doomed to be out $60 this holiday season. I mean, this game was crucial to my childhood. So upon immediate request, my dad and I made a beeline for the nearest Blockbuster, and I handed the guy my crumpled up $5 bill that I had saved from my allowance for one of the 2 copies that they had for this game. We got home and I slammed that shit in the top of my Super Nintendo and braced myself for some arcade goodness. After mashing the start button to get through the Konami logo to the title screen, my mind was blown by something that I saw. 2 fucking players? What the fuck is this shit? My heart instantly sank. What if this isn't even the same game? One of the biggest draws of the arcade game is that you have 4 players. So I'm already pretty livid about the fact that I can't play with 3 other friends, but then I kind of stopped to think for a second. Who the hell am I going to invite over to play 4-player Ninja Turtles with me? I mean, I really only have one good friend. He doesn't live on the Air Force Base, and my parents probably aren't gonna go pick him up, and that's only 2 players. So let's just go ahead and maybe start the game and see how it plays out. Maybe I'll just like it. So I go ahead and hit start and boot the game up, and I am greeted with a pleasant surprise. Not only does the game sound markedly similar to the arcade version, it actually looks a lot like it too, which is awesome in my book. I mean, I knew Super Nintendo could definitely put out the graphics, that would be comparable to the arcade edition, but I didn't really think it would get this close. Obviously, the animations are lacking in a few spots, but you know what? That's forgivable given that I'm playing this at home instead of putting quarters in a machine. I can now play this game as much as I want to. But wait, if you pay close attention, you can see that something's a little bit different about the combat here. For reference, let's take another look at the arcade edition of this game and see what's going on. If you pay close attention, you can see that nearly every one of my strikes is just a randomly decided attack that has a different range and damage, and it makes almost no sense unless you take into account the fact that they made this game to intentionally beat the shit out of you. They did not want you to be good at this game. Your attacks were supposed to be unpredictable. The enemies were supposed to be overbearing, because why the hell else would you put another quarter in this machine if you just made it through on 1 quarter? That would be very counterproductive for arcades. On the flip side of things, when you're at home and you're playing, what's the last thing you want to see in a video game? The continue screen. I mean, come on. The continue screen literally tells you that you fucked up so bad that they're asking you if you actually even want to continue playing the game. Somebody on the design team for this game in Konami really needs kudos, because what they did when they brought it to home console was start to adjust things to make it feel and play like a game that wasn't designed to beat you. It was a game that was designed for you to beat it. You were supposed to be the one that was going to win, but they didn't want to make it too easy. So let's take a look back at the Super Nintendo edition and see what has dramatically changed in the combat. 2 major adjustments were put into the combat in this game when it was ported to the console, so let's take a look at both of those and find out why exactly this game behaves so differently on the Super Nintendo. I've actually slowed this down here so that we can really take a good look at what's going on. Notice when Michelangelo hits the enemy, they're locked in a brief period of an animation where they're not able to really take any sort of action. This is called hit stun, and it's an integral part to how this game functions on console. Locking an enemy in hit stun in a brawler like this is an integral part of the experience. Not only does it give you enough time to launch follow-up attacks, it also provides the player with the opportunity to react to whatever's going on around you. The second major change that was put into the console edition, which actually kind of builds off of hit stun, is that there is now a combo system. No longer are your attacks just random swings and strikes that make no sense with different ranges. Your attacks actually have an order now. Your first attack in any of your combo strings is always the same, which gives you ample opportunity to figure out a character's range and know what you're doing before you get yourself in trouble. Looking back at the arcade version, we can see that while it's not entirely devoid of hit stun, enemies just don't seem to react anywhere near as much when they get hit. In fact, there are plenty of enemies in the game that can actually hit you in the middle of a combo. Also, if you notice, enemies swarm in larger numbers and they will get behind you intentionally. Every single time I'm attacking an enemy, another one is trying to get up behind me and hit me in the back in this game. Doesn't mean that the game's not fun in the arcade, it just means that it's not really made for you to have a fair experience, which is understandable. It's also really notable that the Super Nintendo version added new stages and extra enemies that were not seen in the arcade version of the game. This was really awesome. So they understood that the arcade version was meant to be a quick play. Nobody wants to stand there for an hour and keep pumping quarters in there and yeah. So the Super Nintendo edition added new content to keep people playing. So we have added strategy, maybe a little bit of a downgrade in graphics, but not much, and we have more content. I'm gonna have to tell you guys, I was really disappointed at first when I saw that it was only 2 players on the console, but I'm totally okay with it. I actually prefer the Super Nintendo version over the arcade version. Have you guys played both versions? Which one did you think was better? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, I can be found on Twitch TV, and I'll leave that down in the description below. Thank you for watching.